The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRCMedia, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Here at FRCmedia, we are getting ready for the November 4th general election in Fall River, and we're speaking to as many candidates as possible. Today, we're going to focus on the race for City Council. I'm pleased to be joined by Christopher Peckham. Christopher, you may remember, was a one-time City Councilor, ran in 2019, lost his chance for re-election in 2021, and is back this year to try it again. Chris, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and Keith.
So let me ask you, you ran in 2019. You were successful in terms of getting elected. You didn't get reelected in 2021, decided not to run in 2023. Why run in 2025?
I recently retired back in April, and to be honest, I don't like the path that the city's taken. And I found myself sitting home and critiquing everything that I was watching on the city council meetings, and I was voicing my opinion a lot. And one day I just said, I need to jump back in and try to help. I have the time now being retired. I can do this full time.
Yeah. What did you learn during your 2 years that hopefully will benefit you if you get elected again?
You have to have tough skin, and you have to know the word no. You have to be able to listen to people, but when things aren't necessarily going the way that you think they should, you have to have the ability to say no. It's going to ruffle feathers, and at one point in my council tenure, I had told the mayor and other city councilors that I had to play in my own sandbox and do what was right for the people and not be persuaded on which way to vote, things like that.
Yeah. As you are out and about talking to people, I'm sure some people remember you. It was only a few years ago that you served. What are you telling them as, let's say, your top priority if you get reelected?
The budget. So I've made it quite clear that if I'm elected, I'm a no vote on every increase. Reason for that being, we need a forensic audit. I know that I've heard the term thrown around between mayoral candidates. It's desperately needed. With the budget now, it's ballooned to almost $500 million. And with this MBTA project coming in, a lot of people don't know is we had to create 6,652 new multifamily units, 40% of those within a half a mile of where the train sits.
Yeah.
So it's the budget. The budget, it has to be brought back to zero, in my opinion. The forensic audit is needed, and we have to concentrate first on our main priorities, our police, our fire, funding them, funding sewer, funding the water department, and definitely funding trash. I think we just had an increase of $3 million in trash, and then they allocated another $200,000 back in June. The city's not going to be able to keep up, and with the influx of people, that number is just going to skyrocket. We need to set those standards now for these essential city services to make sure that they're sufficient enough for the city, so that way down the road we're not trying to catch up.
You mentioned that the city's budget is, with the enterprise funds, it is over $500 million with the enterprise funds for EMS, water, and sewer. If the money, in your mind, was spent well, a lot of people look at the number and say, that's a huge number, we've got to do something about it. Is it that, or is it that if the money is spent well in priorities that you feel are worth it? Does the number really matter, I guess?
Well, if the city's being supplied efficiently, then yes, it is being spent well. My gripe to that is we fund these, let's use the police department for an example. They're at minimum manpower still since 2009, during the layoffs of 2009. If we're going to increase our population by, I think it's roughly 14%, we're still going to man the streets with only 10 people. And to me, that's outrageous. Prior to the layoffs, we were at 12 cars, 2 walking beats, and we just had national news with our fire department. They're not staffed sufficiently. If the money was allocated appropriately and these departments were staffed efficiently, that number would make sense, but to me it doesn't.
The city council does not actually set the budget. You can either approve, reject, or reduce.
Yeah.
So those 3 items in the budget that city council has oversight. In Congress, they actually set the budget and on that level. you know, you had an opportunity to work under Mayor Coogan because he
Yes.
was elected the same year you were in 2019. Did you express those budget concerns when you met with him during that one term in office?
Well, absolutely. We got hit with that 45-day rule when I was a counselor. And I was actually the second on a rejection for a budget, and it was over $100,000. There was a $100,000 line item with nothing attached to it. And I had requested in a city council meeting to meet with Miss Matino, who was the department director at the time. And the meeting was pushed off, and it surpassed the 45-day rule, and the budget was passed without the council's approval.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was the, I believe Councilor Ponte was president at the time.
Yes. Yep.
And the council, you missed the deadline, and then it just went in by default based on what had happened. All right, let me ask you a couple of other questions. You mentioned public safety. Staffing, of course, has been an issue. What can a council do in terms of helping recommend that either there's more staffing or even, you know, some recommendations on, you know, how that department and fire department as well can do better?
Marketing. There's quite a few ways with the police department. I know the mayor said years ago, I believe it was in 2021, that they had to make it an honorable profession again. And I highly disagree that the profession was always honorable. It's just in today's day and age, it is tough to reach out and find people that want the job. You have to, again, you got to go back to the budget. You got to allocate money that includes marketing, and it has to include lateral transfers. But you have to give these people the incentive to want to come. Our police department is not highly paid compared to a lot of the other departments in the area or in New England for a similar sized city.
What are your thoughts of Chief Furtado? She's been in almost a year now. I believe it was October when she took over in an interim basis, and now she's the permanent chief. There will be another look at that next year. The city is also looking at possibly making that, again, a civil service position. I know you've talked about previously before our interview, you recorded a statement. You mentioned that you were pushing for civil service back when you were a counselor and believe that's the way to go. What are your thoughts about the chief and the civil service, you know, making that part of the decision?
In 2021, I believe was the last meeting I served as a counselor, I had filed a resolution to bring the police chief back to civil service. And the reason for that was to take the politics out of policing. I saw people being handpicked to be put in that position, and it caused quite a buffer between the council and the police chief. For instance, I had come up with numbers back then and released them to the public of the gang population in the city of Fall River. I think we were at 1,000 gang members, 1,000 known associates, and we had multiple gangs in the city that were fighting over territory. And then the following day, I received notice that councils were not allowed in the police department anymore without a deputy chief or above's approval. I guess that's par for the course. As far as Chief Furtado, I think she's doing a good job. These new units that she's created seem to be working. I see every now and again on the news that there's guns and drugs being taken off the street. But again, it comes back to manpower. While these units are being, you know, supplied with staff, our uniform division, which is it's your boots on the ground, they're the ones that are coming to your house if you need help, is still understaffed. It's still running at 10 cars. And like I said prior, we had a 12-man mandate. It was a 12-man minimum for the streets up until 2009, until the layoffs.
Yeah. You know, since you were a city councilor in 2021, a lot has been made about inflation and cost of living in Fall River. Rents obviously are through the roof, not only in Fall River, across the country. How can a city council help with some ideas to make Fall River more affordable? Obviously, with the budget, you could reduce, you know, items in the budget, which may make an impact on taxes in Fall River. Are there any other ways that the council can help?
I think that we can always provide ideas, that's for sure. I know there's a lot of talk for a tourism director. I think that would be key. Fall River is a waterfront community. We have many reasons to come here and visit. With this 79 project, I don't know how it's going to turn out at the end. But it should definitely be an attraction to visit the city, bring in revenue that way. I think the city council can explore that course to recommend. Yeah.
Now, any ideas on what you'd like to see down at 79? Because that's going to be a big part if you're elected, probably over the next 2 years. I mean, the project will be done next year in terms of the roadway, and then the work will begin on, you know, who has control of the land and how it's divvied up. What would you like to see down there?
Attraction. I want to see stuff down there that gives people the reason to come here. As I said earlier as well, with the 6,652 units that they need to build in the city per the MBTA mandate, 40% of those have to be within a half mile of the train station. I'm hoping that that land is not filled with market rate housing and takes away from the ability to put attractions there and draw people into the city for the revenue.
Yeah. Homelessness has been an issue. It was an issue when you were there. I mean, there were issues at the rail trail and other parts of the city. It seems to have been heightened, again, because of inflation, cost of living, people cannot afford, plus, obviously, people who have mental health and substance abuse issues. It seems like on a biweekly basis, there's someone talking about the encampments and homeless in Fall River. Again, what can a city council do in terms of that, and what ideas would you have in terms of either being more aggressive in terms of handling the encampments or having a little more sympathy?
So in my experience with the homeless, back in 2020, when I was first elected, I went down to the rail trail, and I had noticed that those 10 cities had just started to pop up. And I actually went to Hyannis to speak with them because they have a similar issue. And tried to come up with ways to, not so much combat the issue, but to help the issue and try to figure out a way to get these people housed. And I was told that I was making the city look bad. And then fast forward 5 years, and it became a disaster. Mental health. So I spent a lot of times in those camps as a counselor. I used to give homeless people rides to Seven Hills from the camps. I brought a homeless veteran named Raymond. From Cook Pond to his cancer appointments. I spent a lot of time down there. And what you learn down there is, there are people that are living there that are down on their luck, right? But the majority is mental health and addiction. My idea would be there's got to be recommendations made where we're allocating money to the homeless and it's being put into, I believe it's the FAST team with Nicole Fontaine, which is fantastic. They do a good job. We need more. Unless we combat the mental health problem, you're not going to... People self-medicate for their mental health issues with narcotics, with drugs. If we can get to them and somehow come up with some type of mental health plan to where we grow that FAST team into including more clinicians and more therapists, I don't see that problem going away anytime soon.
We talked a lot about what could happen down on the waterfront, Route 79. Obviously, there are other neighborhoods in this city that need attention. The mayor and the Coogan administration has done some work in the Flint in terms of some of the storefronts there. The mayor has mentioned that the city's investing more in streets. Columbia Street's going to be starting in terms of reworking that. How, as a city councilor, can you work with neighborhoods to try to bring, because obviously, constituent services is number one. It's what a councilor does, right? In terms of getting information from the neighborhoods into the forefront, either through resolutions or through other actions that the council can actually play a big role in.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the neighborhoods. I made sure I showed up when people had called me. I'll use my neighborhood that I grew up in as an example. I grew up on Rodman Street, and I went down there recently for my campaign, and the weeds were up to my waist. I've heard a lot from the residents there, the few that still remain from my childhood, which is sad because you do have single-family homes over there, and people just couldn't take it anymore, and they left. As a council, you can definitely file resolutions to combat neighborhood issues, send them to public safety, send it to ordinance, whatever the case may be. But you have to show up. You have to be out there, and you have to have a voice. You have to have a strong voice and not be persuaded to use it or hindered in your ability to use it.
So is it important for a counselor, you mentioned resolutions, and it's actually probably one of the important things that councilors can do is they can make recommendations to not necessarily see if something will actually get done, but at least have the conversation in committees. What committees were you on last time, and what would you be interested in if elected again?
Public safety chair, environmental health I was on. I would like, obviously being in public safety my whole adult life, I would like to be back on that committee in any capacity, just because I feel that is at the top of what this city needs is public safety. No city's worth living in that's unsafe.
I want to wrap up before I want to go back to the budget where we started, going full circle. During the pandemic, You were on, I believe you represent the city council on the committee that was looking at spending some of the ARPA dollars.
Yes.
Okay. You, if I remember, you showed a lot of frustration during that. Talk about that and how can, counselors, if they're put in a role like that to make recommendations, how can they be more effective?
Yeah, definitely. So I know a lot had changed after I had left. So when I was on that committee, there were closed door meetings that weren't open to the public. And in the first meeting that I was in, a gentleman made a statement that just spend the money however we want. The federal government will never audit it. And it took backlash from the CFO at the time and myself. And then only for the administration to say pretty much that I was lying. I was not lying. You have to, especially in instances like that, when you're a city council, you're the oversight of the people's money. You're the checks and balances. If you hear things like that, you have to come to the forefront. I myself wrote an email to the mayor regarding my concerns. And then I put the email that I written in the mail right on social media because I believe that it was the public's, it should have been public knowledge. It's their money. Regardless of where it came from, it's ARPA money, and people think it's free money. It's still tax money. That money still comes from our pockets. And if nobody speaks up, money disappears. I'm still to this day trying to figure out where all that ARPA money went.
Yeah. All right, Christopher Peckham, thank you for joining me. Congratulations. Good luck.
I appreciate it.
Congratulations for running, and good luck, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Keith.
All right. And thank you for joining us here at FRC Media. Please make a point to vote on Tuesday, November 4th.